All right, let's travel back in time. We're going way back, about 2,500 years ago, to a really remarkable period in India. This was a time that was just buzzing with new questions, a deep, deep search for the real meaning of life that honestly would go on to change the world forever. So you've got to ask, what was going on back then? What was in the air that sparked this incredible explosion of new thinking? That's really the core question we're going to dig into. Why, at this specific moment in history, did this huge wave of revolutionary ideas just sweep across the land? To really get a handle on these new ideas, we first have to understand the world they grew out of. And it was a time of immense social strain. I mean, life was changing fast. New cities were popping up, kingdoms were getting more and more powerful, and a lot of thinkers were just trying to make sense of it all. Now, at the very heart of this society was something called the Varna system. It basically divided everyone into four main groups. You had the Brahmins, who were the priests, the Kshatriyas, the warriors and rulers, the Vaishyas, who were the merchants and farmers, and then the Shudras, the laborers who served the other three. It was a very clear, very strict social ladder. But here's the real kicker, the part that's so important to understand. Your place on that ladder wasn't decided by how talented you were or how hard you worked. Nope, it was decided the moment you were born. If your parents were Brahmins, you were a Brahmin. Period. And you can imagine, this rigid system was starting to cause some serious tension. So what that meant in practice was that the top two groups had a lot of special privileges that nobody else got. And naturally, people started to question this setup. They began to speak out, especially against the way the Brahmin priests dominated all the rituals. The stage was totally set for a revolution in how people thought about the world. And right in the middle of all this social change, one of history's most influential thinkers steps onto the scene, Siddhartha Gautama, who would later become known as the Buddha, which means the wise one. His life story is just incredible. He was actually born a Kshatriya prince, living a life of comfort, but he left it all behind, left his palace to go out in search of real knowledge. After years of searching, he finally achieved enlightenment while meditating under a peepal tree at a place called Bodh Gaya. And from there, he made his way to Sarnath to give his very first teaching. And this is that place. This is the stupa at Sarnath. It's a monument built to mark the exact spot where the Buddha first shared his profound insights with the world. It's like a physical anchor for that pivotal moment in history. So, what was his message? What did he teach? Well, the Buddha said that life is full of suffering and unhappiness, and he pinpointed a root cause for all of it, a concept he called tanha, which literally means thirst or craving. He said it's our constant wanting, that endless desire for more things, for things we can't have, that is the real source of our pain. But he didn't just point out the problem, he offered a way out. He laid out a path of balance and awareness. First, he said, follow moderation in everything you do. Second, be kind and show respect for all living things, including animals. And third, understand that your actions, what he called your karma, have consequences that will affect you both in this life and in the ones to come. You know, the Buddha was a brilliant teacher, and he often used stories to get his point across. One of the most famous is about a woman named Gautama. She was just overwhelmed with grief because her young son had died, and she went to the Buddha, desperately begging him to bring her son back to life. The Buddha listened to her with compassion, and then he gave her what seemed like a very simple task. He told her he could help, but first, she had to bring him a handful of mustard seeds. But they had to come from a house where no one had ever died. So, filled with this new hope, Gautama went from door to door. But everywhere she went, she heard the same sad story. In one house, a father had died. In another, a mother or a child. She couldn't find a single home that hadn't been touched by death. And through this simple, powerful task, the Buddha was gently showing her a universal truth, that loss and sorrow aren't just her private pain. They're a fundamental part of being human that we all share. Now, the Buddha wasn't the only great thinker during this incredible era. Around the same time, another teacher named Gautama Mahavira was also gathering followers and spreading his message. And what's just fascinating is how much their stories overlap. Just like the Buddha, Mahavira was also a Kshatriya prince, and when he was 30, he too left his home and all its comforts behind to go on a quest for enlightenment. It took him 12 long, hard years, but he found it. If you had to boil down Mahavira's entire teaching to one single powerful idea, it would be this: ahimsa. It's the principle of nonviolence, and it's a profound commitment to not hurting or killing any living being. And Mahavira himself said it so beautifully with these words: all beings long to live. To all things life is dear. I mean, that's just a radical call for empathy, for a deep respect for every single form of life.
Okay, so at the same time all of this was going on, other thinkers were asking different but equally deep questions. These were the thinkers of the Upanishads, and they were exploring new ideas from within the older Vedic traditions.
Their really big questions were about life after death and what, if anything, is permanent in the universe. They came up with this idea of the Atman. You can think of it as the individual soul, and the Brahman, which is like the universal soul. And their ultimate kind of mind-blowing conclusion, that the individual soul and the universal soul were actually one and the same. There's this amazing story from one of the Upanishads that really gets this idea across. A beggar comes up to two wise men, two sages, as they're sitting down to eat. And he asks them, "Learned sirs, whom do you worship?" And they reply, "The universal soul." "Ah," the beggar says, "so you know that the universal soul fills the whole world." The sages nod, "Yes, we do." So the beggar continues, "Well, if the universal soul fills the whole world, then it must fill me too. So by not giving me food, you are actually denying food to the universal soul." The sages were stunned. They realized the truth in his words and immediately shared their food with him. So you've got all these incredible new ideas swirling around, but what did that actually look like on the ground? Well, it led to people forming totally new ways of living together, brand new communities that were built around these philosophies. Both the Buddha and Mahavira started something called the Sangha. It was basically an association, a community for people who left their homes behind to search for true knowledge. The members, monks and nuns, lived very simple lives. They spent most of their time meditating and would beg for their food each day. And this is what was so absolutely revolutionary about the Sangha. Look at who was joining. You had Brahmins, Kshatriyas, merchants, laborers, barbers, even courtesans and slaves. Everybody was welcome. It didn't matter who you were, what family you came from, or what your social status was. None of it mattered inside the Sangha. As these communities grew, they eventually built more permanent shelters, called viharas, or monasteries. And what you're looking at here is a jaw-dropping example of a cave vihara in Karle, Maharashtra. These became centers of shelter, meditation, and learning for the monks and nuns. There's a quote from an early Buddhist text that just perfectly captures the spirit of what they were doing. It says that just like rivers all lose their individual names when they flow into the ocean, people's social class, their rank, and their family name were all forgotten when they joined the order of monks. What a truly radical idea for that time. So when you step back and look at it all, from the rigid social system that sparked these questions, to the Buddha's path away from suffering, Mahavira's powerful call for nonviolence, and the Upanishadic search for the soul, this was an era that was wrestling with life's biggest questions. And it brings us to a final thought. 2,500 years later, which of these profound ideas still speaks to us today?